Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be looking at Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows.
Oh, yeah.
It's a book that kind of promises to change how you see the world.
It does?
Um, have you ever made a decision, and it's a small decision,
Mm-hmm.
but then it leads to all these unintended consequences that you didn't foresee?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah. Well, systems thinking can help us understand why that happens.
Yeah. And maybe even avoid them.
Yeah.
Like, that's the goal.
That would be great.
Meadows does a great job of kind of demystifying
Yeah.
systems and how they work.
So before we get too far,
Mm-hmm.
what is systems thinking?
Well, I think the best way to think about it is it's a way of looking at the world that focuses on relationships and connections,
Okay.
as opposed to just individual tensor actors.
Gotcha.
So it's about understanding how things change over time and how different parts of a system interact and influence each other.
So you're saying it's more about the bigger picture.
The bigger picture.
Yeah.
Looking at the whole...
I know Meadows uses all these vivid examples.
Yeah, she does.
From a bathtub to a city.
Yeah, a tree.
A tree. Yeah.
And she uses these everyday examples to highlight
Yeah.
the core components of what a system is.
Okay.
So the elements, the interconnections between the elements and the system's purpose.
I
So
see.
if we think about a tree,
Yeah.
the leaves, the branches, the trunks, the roots, those are all elements,
Okay.
but it's the interconnections between them, the flow of nutrients and water that allow the tree to function as a whole.
Right.
And the purpose of the tree is to grow, reproduce, provide shade, be a part of the larger ecosystem.
It's interesting because I was reading a news story the other day about a city
Mm-hmm.
that was trying to solve its traffic problem
Oh, yeah.
by building more roads,
Okay.
but it totally backfired.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up with even worse traffic than they had before.
You know, if they had used systems thinking, they probably could have seen that coming.
Yeah.
That sometimes adding more roads just encourages more people to drive, and it just makes the problem worse.
So what you're saying is a system is more than just the sum of its parts.
A system is more than the sum of its parts. It has its own emergent behavior that can often surprise us.
Like what?
Well, she uses the example of drug addiction.
Okay.
So you have individuals who are seeking relief.
Mm-hmm.
You have farmers and dealers seeking to make a living.
Right.
You have law enforcement trying to control the supply.
Yeah.
Each of these actors is acting rationally within their own sphere,
Mm-hmm.
but the combined effect is a system that perpetuates the very problem everyone's trying to address.
So how can we understand how these systems behave?
Whoa.
And ideally, anticipate some of these unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's where feedback loops come in.
Feedback use.
Feedback loops.
Okay.
They're really the key to understanding why systems act the way they do.
Can you give me an example of how a feedback loop works?
Sure. Imagine you're feeling tired, so you drink a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
The caffeine boosts your energy for a while, but then a few hours later,
Yeah.
you start to feel tired again, so you reach for another cup.
Right.
So your initial action of drinking coffee creates a change in your energy level, and that change then influences your future actions, potentially creating a cycle of caffeine dependence.
Oh, so it's a loop where an action produces information that then feeds back into the system.
Exactly.
And that influences future actions.
And those loops can be either balancing
Okay.
or reinforcing.
Gotcha.
Balancing loops strive for stability,
Yeah, okay.
like a thermostat maintaining room temperature.
Right.
As the room gets too hot, the thermostat kicks in to cool it down, and as it gets too cool, it turns the heat back on, keeping the temperature within a desired range.
Makes sense.
And then you have reinforcing loops, which create exponential growth or decline.
Okay. Like a snowball rolling down a hill.
Exactly.
It gets bigger and bigger as it picks up more snow.
Yeah, or the classic example is compound interest. The more money you have in your account, the more interest you earn, which leads to even more money and even more interest, and it just keeps growing.
Right. So it seems like we should be able to predict how these systems are going to behave.
You would think so.
But Meadows says our brains don't always think in systems.
Right.
So why do we keep getting surprised?
Well, one reason is because we tend to think linearly
Okay.
in a world that's decidedly nonlinear.
What do you mean?
Well, we kind of instinctively expect this simple proportional cause and effect relationship. But systems often behave in unexpected ways.
Okay.
It's like assuming if you double the advertising budget, you'll automatically double sales,
Right.
which is not always the case.
Yeah, definitely not always the case.
And another pitfall is what Meadows calls bounded rationality.
Okay.
It means that even when we're trying to be rational, we still make decisions with limited information,
All right.
and we often fail to foresee all of the ripple effects of our actions.
Like those fishermen.
Exactly.
We're all trying to get the most fish.
Yeah, each one thinking, what difference does my small catch make?
Right.
But when everyone acts that way,
Yeah.
it depletes the fish population.
So our individual actions, even if they seem small,
Mm-hmm.
can contribute to larger systemic problems.
And then there are delays.
delay.
Those pesky time lags between our actions and the consequences.
Oh, I've definitely experienced that at work.
Yeah.
You make a change thinking you'll see immediate results, but then
Sometimes it takes weeks.
weeks or even months.
Or even months to see the impact.
Yeah, and that can be frustrating.
Meadows uses the example of trying to stabilize inventory levels at a car dealership.
Okay.
Delays in ordering and delivery can create these wild swings in inventory,
Wow.
leading to shortages or overstock.
So delays can really mess things up.
They can amplify instability,
Yeah.
making it even harder to manage.
Okay, so we're dealing with these complex systems that can be really unpredictable.
And that's why understanding these system properties
Mm.
is so crucial for making better decisions.
So it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
Systems can also work incredibly well
Okay.
when they have properties like resilience, self-organization, and hierarchy.
So they can actually work in our favor.
They can.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about the resilience of a forest ecosystem after a fire.
Okay.
It's able to regenerate because of its diverse and interconnected structure.
Or like the human body
Exactly.
and how it can heal itself.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And self-organization is equally mind-blowing.
Oh.
It's the ability of a system to create new structures and behaviors to essentially evolve.
Wow.
We see this in everything from the formation of a snowflake to the emergence of new technologies.
And what about hierarchy?
Hierarchy you can think of as nature's way of organizing complexity.
Okay.
It creates stability and efficiency by breaking down large systems into smaller, more manageable subsystems.
So like a university
Yeah.
with its different departments.
Yeah, and each level of the hierarchy has its own purpose and interconnections.
Right.
But they also work together to achieve the overall goals of the larger system.
Okay, so there is order within the complexity.
There is. And understanding these properties can help us avoid pitfalls
Mm-hmm.
and also identify opportunities for positive change.
Now, Meadows also talks about these system traps.
He does.
You know, things that lead to unintended, undesirable outcomes.
She calls them archetypes.
Oh.
And they reveal these common patterns of problematic behavior.
So if we can recognize these traps,
Yeah.
then maybe we can avoid them.
And that's the goal.
And Meadows doesn't just highlight the problems.
No,
She offers solutions, right?
she does.
Okay, good.
It's about understanding the underlying structures that drive these patterns and then finding those leverage points where we can intervene to change the system's behavior.
Okay, let's dive into some of these system traps.
Okay.
Because I have a feeling we've all encountered them in one form or another.
I think you're right.
Okay, let's start with the tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, that's a classic one.
I've definitely heard that term before.
Yeah, it's a powerful illustration of what happens when individual self-interest clashes with the long-term well-being of the collective.
Okay.
So imagine a shared pasture where each herdsman is allowed to graze their cattle.
Okay.
Each herdsman thinks, what difference will one more cow make?
Right.
But as each individual acts rationally within their own limited scope, the shared pasture gets depleted, ultimately harming everyone.
So we're talking about like overfishing.
Exactly.
Polluting the atmosphere. It's like everyone doing what's best for them, but then
Collectively.
collectively it creates this huge problem.
Yeah, a tragedy.
Yeah. Okay, what about shifting the burden to the intervener?
Oh, that's another good one.
I always forget what that one's about.
It's when we become reliant on short-term fixes that mask the underlying problem,
Okay.
ultimately creating dependence.
So like relying on painkillers
Yeah,
to manage chronic pain,
exactly.
but never actually addressing the root cause.
Or a government subsidizing a failing industry, instead of encouraging restructuring and innovation.
So these interventions, while offering temporary relief,
Mm.
can actually weaken the system's ability to heal itself.
It's like a crutch that prevents the system from strengthening its own muscles.
What other traps are there?
Well, there's this one called drift to low performance.
Drift to low performance.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, it describes situations where performance standards gradually erode over time
Oh.
due to a negative bias in how we perceive past performance.
So instead of striving for improvement, we lower the bar each time
Exactly.
and accept mediocrity as the new norm.
Yeah, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, wow.
The lower the expectations, the lower the effort, and the worse the actual performance becomes.
So how do we get out of that trap?
Meadows suggests keeping standards absolute, regardless of past performance.
Okay,
So hold on to that vision of excellence no matter what.
I like it.
Even better, make goals sensitive to the best performances of the past, not the worst.
So learn from the successes.
Yes, let those successes inspire even greater achievements.
Okay, but what else?
There's also the trap of escalation.
Escalation.
Yeah, which is all too common in competitive situations.
Oh, yeah, like arms races or
Exactly.
bidding wars.
It's a classic reinforcing feedback loop where each side tries to outdo the other, leading to a dangerous and often unsustainable spiral.
So how do we break free from that?
Well, Meadows suggests a few solutions.
Okay,
One is to simply refuse to compete,
just walk away.
which breaks the reinforcing loop.
Okay.
Another is to negotiate a new system that uses balancing loops to control the escalation and create a more sustainable equilibrium.
So it's about de-escalating the situation.
Exactly.
Okay, are there any other traps we should be watching out for?
Well, there's one more I wanted to mention. It's
Yeah.
called success to the successful.
Success to the successful.
Yeah.
What's that one about?
It highlights the inherent unfairness that can arise in systems where the winners are repeatedly rewarded with the means to win again.
It's like a rigged game
They can feel that way.
where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Meadows uses the example of economic inequality to illustrate this trap.
Good.
Wealth privilege and access to resources create a reinforcing feedback loop
Yeah.
that perpetuates and exacerbates existing disparities.
So how do we break that cycle?
Well, Meadows suggests things like progressive taxation, where the wealthy pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes, social safety nets to support those in need, and investments in education and healthcare to level the playing field.
So we can actually design systems to be more equitable.
We can.
That's good to know.
It's about interrupting those harmful feedback loops.
Okay, so it's not enough to just understand these traps.
Right.
We have to find ways to interrupt those feedback loops.
And that brings us to leverage points.
Leverage the points.
Those places in a system where a small change can produce a significant impact.
This sounds really useful.
It is.
Okay, so tell me about these leverage points.
Meadows lays out a hierarchy of leverage points, starting with those that are least effective and moving towards those that are most powerful.
Right.
At the bottom of the list are numbers.
Numbers.
Things like subsidies, taxes, and standards.
Okay.
These are the parameters that we often try to tweak, thinking they'll solve the problem.
But they rarely do.
Right. It's like trying to fix a broken engine by adjusting the air pressure in the tires.
You're not getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly.
So where do we go from there?
Well, the next level up is buffers.
Buffers.
The size of stabilizing stocks relative to their flows.
Okay. I'm not sure I follow.
Think about the difference between a lake and a river.
Okay.
A lake with its large volume of water is more resilient to fluctuations in inflow and outflow than a river.
I see.
It's the same with financial reserves, inventories, or even the size of a population.
So having those reserves or buffers creates greater stability.
Exactly.
Okay, what's next?
Then there are delays.
Delays again.
Yeah, those time lags between actions and their consequences.
Right.
Meadows emphasizes the importance of understanding and managing delays to prevent oscillations and instability.
So like anticipating those time lags in a supply chain
Exactly.
or recognizing the delayed effects of policy decisions.
Precisely.
Okay, what else?
Then we have information flows.
Information flows.
The structure of who does and does not have access to information.
Okay,
This one's crucial.
I can see how that would be important.
Meadows provides a fascinating example of how making energy consumption more visible in Dutch homes led to significant reductions in electricity use.
Wow.
So transparency and access to information can be powerful drivers of change.
So what you're saying is that people need to be informed.
Yes, an informed public is essential for a well-functioning system.
What's the next level?
That would be rules.
Rules.
The formal and informal structures that govern a system's behavior.
So like laws and regulations,
Exactly.
but also like social norms.
Yes, all of those things influence how a system functions.
Okay.
They can either promote or hinder desired outcomes.
So changing the rules can be a really powerful leverage point.
It can be, but Meadows also warns us about the potential for rule beating.
Rule beating?
Yeah, those perverse behaviors that arise when individuals try to game the system.
Oh, I see.
So it's not just about changing the rules, it's
Uh,
about designing them in a way that encourages the desired behavior.
and minimizes unintended consequences.
Exactly.
Okay, what about self-organization?
That's one of the most powerful leverage points.
Okay, tell me more.
It's the ability of a system to change its own structure and behavior.
This sounds kind of magical.
It can feel that way.
Okay.
Meadows uses the example of evolution to illustrate this point.
Okay.
It's a process of constant experimentation, adaptation, and emergence of new forms and behaviors.
So it's not a top-down process.
No, it's a dynamic interplay of forces that can lead to incredible outcomes.
So how do we harness that power?
By creating the conditions for innovation and allowing the system to find its own solutions.
That's a big shift in thinking,
It is.
from control to stewardship.
Yes, exactly.
But I love that idea.
And then, of course, there's the ultimate leverage point,
The goal.
the goal of the system.
Yeah.
Meadows says it best. If the goal is wrong, everything else becomes misaligned.
It's like programming a computer with the wrong code.
Exactly.
It's not going to work.
No matter how powerful the hardware is.
Right. So it's about getting the goal right.
It's about clarifying our values, defining our goals, and making sure the system is aligned with those goals.
And that's not something any one person can do, is it?
It's a collective effort.
It is.
It requires dialogue, listening to diverse perspectives, and finding common ground.
This has been such a great introduction to systems thinking.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But there's still so much more to explore.
In the next part, we'll delve into Meadows' insights on how to actually live and thrive in this world of complex systems.
I can't wait.
Me neither. So now that we've gotten a better grasp on how systems work and some of their properties,
Right.
let's talk about how we actually interact with them. Meadows has this whole section called Dancing with Systems.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And it's all about moving beyond this illusion of control that we often have
Yeah.
and embracing a more collaborative and adaptive approach.
Okay, so less controlling, more collaborating.
Exactly.
That sounds like a good approach.
Yeah, and it starts with recognizing that we are not separate from these systems, but rather embedded within them.
Okay.
So our actions create ripple effects.
Right.
And the systems themselves shape our choices and possibilities.
So it really is more of a dance
Yeah, it's a dance.
than like a wrestling match.
Exactly.
I like that analogy.
And Meadows offers some great advice on how to become better dancers.
Okay. I'm all ears.
One key principle is to get the beat of the system.
That's the beat.
Yeah, to understand its inherent rhythms and delays.
So like those feedback loops
Yeah.
and time lags.
Exactly.
Got it,
Okay,
man.
I used to get so frustrated when I would implement a new strategy at work and I wouldn't see results right away.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
But after reading Meadows, I realized I was expecting linear change in a complex system.
Which almost never happens.
Right. It rarely works that way.
Yeah.
So patience is key.
Patience.
Patience.
Okay.
And it's not just about understanding the system itself.
Hmm.
It's about understanding ourselves,
Well,
recognizing our own biases and limitations.
that's a good point because we each come to these situations with our own experiences and perspectives,
Exactly.
which can shape how we see the system.
And Meadows talks about the importance of honoring information.
Honoring information.
Yeah. And avoiding language pollution.
Language pollution.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's about using language in a way that's clear, precise, and truthful,
Okay.
avoiding jargon buzzwords and overly abstract language.
I can obscure meaning.
Exactly. It can distort our understanding of the system.
So it's about being mindful of the language we use.
Yes, and it's also about being willing to expand our language, to develop new words and concepts that can better capture the complexity we're encountering.
So it's like needing a new vocabulary
Yes,
to describe a newly discovered landscape.
exactly.
We need those new words to accurately depict what we are seeing.
And Meadows also encourages us to pay attention to quality,
Okay.
not just quantity.
Quality over quantity.
In our data-driven world, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers.
Yeah, the metrics.
Yeah, but those metrics don't always tell the whole story.
That's a good point because not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted.
Exactly.
I like that.
And Meadows urges us to become quality detectors.
Quality detectors.
Yeah, to notice and call out ugliness, tackiness, or anything that's morally or ecologically degrading.
So speak truth to power.
Yes, even when it's uncomfortable.
Okay.
We need to be courageous and refuse to let those lower standards become the norm.
I like that.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
Meadows also talks about designing systems for intrinsic responsibility.
Intrinsic responsibility.
Yeah, what do you think that means?
I'm picturing a system where the people making the decisions are the ones who feel the consequences of those decisions.
You're on the right track.
Okay.
It's about creating feedback loops that connect actions to outcomes.
So that people are more accountable?
Exactly.
Meadows uses the example of pilots riding in the front of the plane, right?
That's the one.
Their own safety is directly linked to the quality of their decisions.
Right. It's a powerful incentive
It is.
for careful and responsible decision-making.
Do you think we could apply that principle to other systems?
Absolutely.
Like how?
Well, she suggests requiring companies that pollute a river
Okay.
to place their intake pipes downstream
Oh, wow.
from their outflow pipes.
So they have to drink their own pollution.
Yeah,
Oh,
basically.
yeah, I see it.
It's about closing those feedback loops and making responsibility more tangible.
That's a great idea.
And this requires us to let go of the illusion of control, to admit
Yeah.
that we don't have all the answers, and to be open to being surprised by the system.
So humility is key.
Humility is key.
Okay.
And Meadows also talks about being a lifelong learner,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
recognizing that our understanding of complex systems is always incomplete. We're
Right.
constantly learning and adapting.
So we have to be open to new information.
Yes, and she calls this error embracing.
They were embracing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that mistakes are inevitable and they can be valuable learning opportunities.
So it's not about being afraid to make mistakes.
No, it's about learning from them.
Learn from your mistakes.
Exactly.
I like that.
You know, I actually struggle with this sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, I can be a bit of a perfectionist,
Oh.
so it's hard for me to embrace those mistakes.
But you're working on it?
I'm working on it.
That's great.
It takes courage and vulnerability to admit that we don't have all the answers.
And Meadows says it's not just a personal thing, right?
Right. It's also societal.
What do you mean?
She argues that acknowledging uncertainty can actually increase trust and credibility.
Oh, that's interesting.
People are more likely to trust those who are honest about what they don't know
That makes sense.
than those who pretend to have all the answers.
So honesty is the best policy.
It is.
Okay. What else does Meadows have to say?
Well, she also encourages us to celebrate complexity.
Celebrate complexity.
Yeah, to appreciate the diversity and interconnectedness of the systems we're a part of.
So embrace the messiness.
Yeah, instead of trying to simplify everything.
Okay.
We should appreciate the richness and intricacy of the world around us.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
And she encourages us to expand time horizons.
Expand time horizons.
To think beyond those short-term gains
Okay.
and consider the long-term consequences of our actions.
That's something I'm really trying to work on.
Me too.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day.
And lose sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly.
You know, she actually critiques the whole concept of the interest rate.
Yeah.
She sees it as a dangerous oversimplification that discounts the future in favor of the present.
So it prioritizes immediate profits
Yes.
over long-term sustainability.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting perspective.
It is.
I've never thought about it that way before.
It highlights the importance of taking a more holistic and interconnected view of time
Yeah, recognizing that our actions today have ripple effects.
that extend far beyond the present moment.
Our past, present, and future are all intertwined.
That's beautifully said.
Okay, anything else?
One last piece of advice from Meadows.
Okay.
She urges us to defy the disciplines.
Defy the disciplines.
Yes, to break free from those traditional silos of knowledge
Oh, wait.
and embrace a more interdisciplinary approach to understanding systems.
So instead of just looking at the world through the lens of economics or biology or politics, we should be willing to draw insights from multiple disciplines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because complex systems don't conform to those neat disciplinary boundaries.
So we need to be open to learning from people outside of our own fields.
Yes, to challenge those disciplinary assumptions
Mhm.
and synthesize insights from multiple fields to create a more holistic understanding.
This has been so helpful.
I'm glad.
It's like Meadows is giving us a whole new way of seeing the world.
And a new set of tools
Yes.
for creating positive change.
It's both challenging and inspiring,
It is.
but it leaves me feeling hopeful.
Me too.
Like we can actually make a difference,
We can.
even in this world of complex and unpredictable systems.
We just need to learn how to dance.
I like that.
It's a good analogy.
It is.
So there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
Meadows provides this powerful framework for understanding systems.
Right.
But she also leaves us with this really important question.
Okay.
Where do we find the leverage to create the change we want to see in the world?
That's a big question,
It is.
but I'm ready to tackle it.
Me too.
Let's do it. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about how systems work.
Yeah.
All those traps and leverage points.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm thinking, where do we find the leverage
Yeah, where is it?
to actually create change in these complex systems?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. It's like we can understand the systems.
Yeah.
We can learn to dance with them, like you said.
Right.
But how do we actually shift their behavior
In a meaningful way.
in a way that creates real change?
It's tough because, as Meadows points out, these systems,
Yeah.
they're often counterintuitive.
Right. What seems obvious doesn't always work.
Like she uses that analogy of the trim tab on a ship.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
So you might think that to change a ship's direction, you need to like wrestle with that massive rudder.
Right. It would take a lot of force.
A ton of force.
Yeah.
But the trim tab is this tiny little lever
Okay.
that controls the angle of the rudder.
So a small adjustment to the trim tab can have big impact.
Huge impact on the ship's course.
It's about finding those leverage points
Exactly.
that can amplify our efforts.
It's not about brute force.
So where do we find those leverage points?
Well, Meadows lays out this whole hierarchy, starting with the least effective and moving towards the most powerful.
So let's start with those less effective ones.
Yeah. The traps we often fall into.
Okay.
One is getting fixated on the numbers.
The numbers.
Like taxes, subsidies, regulations.
Right, thinking that if we just tweak those,
Yeah.
that'll fix everything.
But like we talked about before,
Yeah.
it's often like adjusting the air pressure in the tires
Yeah.
of a broken engine.
You're not really addressing the root cause.
Not at all.
So what Meadows is saying is that those things can be leverage points,
Mm-hmm.
but only if you really push them.
Yeah. If you push them far enough
Okay.
to actually alter the system's behavior.
So like a huge shift in interest rates
Exactly.
or a big increase in the minimum wage.
That's a good example.
So it's about understanding those thresholds
Mm-hmm.
where a small change can lead to a big shift.
Right. And having enough information to anticipate what those ripple effects might be.
Okay, what's another trap?
Trying to change the physical structure of a system after it's already built.
Oh yeah, that's like trying to redesign a city's transportation system
Exactly.
after it's been designed around cars for decades.
Meadows says the real leverage point there is in the design phase.
Oh, so being proactive.
Proactive.
Yeah.
Thinking about those long-term consequences and creating systems that are adaptable and resilient from the start.
Okay, what about manipulating prices?
Oh, yeah, that's another one.
Governments do that all the time,
All the time.
like setting a minimum wage or capping the price of healthcare.
But those interventions often backfire.
Yeah, they can create shortages or surpluses,
Exactly.
or even undermine the goals they're trying to achieve.
So it's about understanding how those market forces work and finding ways to align them with our desired outcomes.
Okay, so working with the system
Working with it.
instead of against it. Okay, so those are some of the less effective leverage points.
Right.
What about the ones that are more powerful?
Well, one we already touched on is information flows.
Information flows.
Yeah, who has access to what information?
Right, because if people are informed,
Yeah.
they can make better decisions.
It's about transparency.
Transparency.
Yeah, making sure people can actually see how the system works.
Okay, so we need accurate and accessible information.
Yes. And we also need to combat misinformation
Right.
and promote media literacy.
So people can critically evaluate the information they're getting.
Exactly.
Okay.
What else? Changing the rules of the system.
The rules.
Yeah, the formal and informal structures that shape its behavior,
So like laws and regulations.
but also social norms.
Right.
Changing the rules can create new possibilities
Mm-hmm.
and incentivize desired outcomes.
Like civil rights legislation.
Exactly.
Or environmental regulations.
Huge impact.
But you said there's a risk of rule beating.
There is.
So we have to be careful about how we design those rules.
To minimize those unintended consequences.
Right. So it's not just about changing the rules.
Okay.
It's about changing them in the right way.
In a way that aligns with their goals.
Exactly.
What about self-organization?
Ah, that's a fascinating one.
It is. It's like the system evolving on its own.
Yeah, like Meadows talks about evolution.
Right.
It's this constant experimentation and adaptation.
Yeah, new forms and behaviors emerging.
And it's not controlled.
So how do we work with that?
By creating the conditions for innovation
Okay.
and letting the system find its own solutions.
They have to let go of some control.
We do.
But that can be scary.
It can.
But it's also kind of beautiful.
It is.
It's like trusting in the system's ability to heal itself.
Yeah, to find its own way forward.
Okay, and then there's that ultimate leverage point.
The goal.
The goal, the system.
If we get the goal wrong,
Yeah.
Everything else is misaligned.
It's like that computer code analogy.
Exactly.
If you put in the wrong code.
You're not going to get the results you want. So we need to define our goals.
Yes.
And make sure the system is aligned with those goals.
And that's not a simple task.
No, it requires a lot of dialogue.
It does.
Listening to different perspectives.
And finding common ground.
Because we're all part of these systems.
We are.
Our choices have an impact.
Yeah, even small choices.
Yeah, it's both humbling
Yeah.
and empowering.
It is.
Because we can make a difference.
We can.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
Yeah, we learned a lot.
Systems thinking is such a powerful tool.
For understanding the world.
And for creating positive change.
And it gives us hope.
It does.
That even in this complex world, we can make a difference.
We just have to learn how to dance.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
And keep learning, keep questioning, and keep dancing.